Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our Microsoft Dynamics GP User Webinar 2018. Today's webinar is a combination of both new information regarding the Dynamics GP 2018 release and some additional things that we know all of our clients are interested in with regard to extending your GP solution in the year 2018. So today's webinar is an extension of a series of events that we've run recently. We did a forum, an in-person forum in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth, and we presented some specific content for our GP clients. And today is a webinar for a few reasons. One is for those people that weren't able to attend our in-person event. We're presenting this webinar with the relevant content from the forum. And it's also an opportunity for anyone that did come along to the event to have another look at the GP 2018 information, as well as a couple of other things, key points that we've taken from that event. My name's Michael. I'll be your host today. And I also have Rob Giannini here with me presenting the content for us this afternoon. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items I'd just like to mention. Firstly, at any time during the session, on the right-hand side of your screen in your GoToWebinar panel, you can ask us a question. So if you type your question into the questions palette there within the panel, Rob and I have allowed some time at the end of the session today to get to those questions and answer them for you. And secondly, we are definitely recording this session for you, and we will upload it to our YouTube channel and send you a link as a follow-up to the session today. So that'll allow you to either rewatch the content yourself or even forward that link around to someone else within your organisation that you think may be interested. So on that note, let's start into the content itself. So today's agenda, as I mentioned, it's driven from our user forum that we did a few weeks ago. But what we've done is we've taken a couple of very specific pieces for that for our webinar today. And we're taking obviously the GP piece. So the Dynamics GP 2018 release from Microsoft was officially available in December last year. Our third-party vendors have made their product available. So from a timing perspective, now is the relevant time to be presenting that content to you. So we're going to take you through some of the key pieces around what's new in GP 2018. We also know that now is the best time to consider, or when upgrading is the best time to consider, the platform under which you're going to deploy your new release. We also saw that one of the more popular items in the forum was the Power BI piece. So we've added that into the agenda today as well for the webinar for you. And then we just finish off by highlighting a couple of questions for you with a plan and next steps to take action. So there's a couple of things that I'd just like to note here for you in terms of when thinking about a 2018 upgrade. And the first thing is to just highlight where we are in the Microsoft Dynamics GP lifecycle. We're presenting to you today the 2018 release and some specific key features taken out of that 2018 release. We will also note and touch on some items that have come from previous versions, and workflow is a perfect example of that. The reason we want to highlight this to you here is because depending on the version that you are currently running, when you come through to upgrade to a GP 2018, you will obtain, or you will make available to you, all the functionality that's come through those previous releases. For example, if you're coming from GP 2013, then you'll get all the rolled up features of 2015, 16, and all the way through to 2018. The other thing that we just want to highlight here is that the Microsoft Dynamics GP product is quite a mature product, and we already have commitment confirmed from Microsoft of future releases. So they have already locked in the 2018 next release in next half of this year, and then the 2019 release has already been planned and scheduled as well. Just wanted to also highlight one other thing, and when I reference the version that you're coming from is important, it's also important to note the support lifecycle from Microsoft in terms of the version that you are currently running. So if we look at the very bottom item here on the support lifecycle, you note that the GP 2018 version was released in December of 2017. Microsoft have what they call a 5+5 year support lifecycle program for their products. Dynamics GP is one of those products that fits into that lifecycle policy. And they have a 5-year mainstream support and 5 years extended support. The extended support is basically things like security hotfixes, and Microsoft will continue to support that 5 years beyond mainstream support. But the important one from a usability and a functionality perspective is to consider that 5 years mainstream support. And it's within that 5 years from release date that Microsoft will continue to update the product and fix anything from a functional perspective within the application. So that's done within the 5 years. So if we look at the 2018 release, which we just have, you'll see that that's supported right out until October of 2023, which is obviously quite a ways into the future. If we go backwards, so we're decreasing in versions here released. So the 2016 release will be supported mainstream right through to 2021. The 2015 version right through until 2020. But the two that I really do want to specifically highlight here are GP 2013 and GP 2010. The GP 2013 release ends mainstream support in this month. So April of this year, Microsoft ends their mainstream support of GP 2013. Anything prior to that, of course, and we're just highlighting GP 2010 there, is already out of mainstream support. So the important thing to note here as a user of your GP solution is we wouldn't recommend any organization to not be running a solution that's not under mainstream support. And that 5-year period there is quite a generous period under which you can run a version with it still being within mainstream support. So certainly anyone that is currently running GP 2013 or below needs to seriously be planning for an upgrade sooner rather than later. And the dates there on the other releases are also important. But the question then outside of a mainstream support date becomes functionality. So if you're running GP 2016, while it is within mainstream support, you're going to be looking at and considering what functional reason would you be wanting to upgrade to GP 2018, and whether that's a new feature, whether that's a compatibility piece with another third-party application or a complementary Microsoft solution. So those dates are important there, depending on the version that you are currently running. So on that note, I'd like to introduce you to Rob Giannini, who'll be taking us through the content today. And Rob, as you see, has worked on a number of GP projects and specifically has a passion for helping organizations improve the businesses with using that technology, and certainly using that Dynamics GP technology. So Rob's taken a select set of new functionality that's come out with 2018, and he's going to take us through that presentation today, as well as a couple other pieces around the platform and Power BI. So thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate the words of passion. Thanks. Yeah, I'm quite passionate. Been working with the product for nearly 20 years, so I suppose if there was no passion, I probably wouldn't have lasted that long. Okay, so yeah, as Michael's indicated, hi everyone. We're going to take you through, or I'm going to take you through what's new in 2018. And the slide at the moment I have up there is basically just pointing out the items that we've sort of handpicked out of all the what's new that are in 2018. And we'll start off with some system-wide sort of what's news, and then we'll focus in on some of the more specific ones in the specific areas around, debtors and creditors and so forth. So without further ado, and without talking about all of those there, let's actually go through them and have a look. So I'm just going to switch out of the slide deck now into Dynamics GP. So here is, if everyone should see my screen, here is Dynamics GP 2018. I've logged into the application. I'm sitting on the home page. So there's my home page. And for all the people who may be slightly unfamiliar with what they're seeing here, because you're coming from an earlier version, you should note that the one big difference is obviously that on my home page, I'm showing the Power BI, or reporting piece on my home page, which was initially released in 2016, the functionality to include your Power BI piece on your home page. But they've extended on that, and as Michael said, we'll in the agenda we'll touch more on the Power BI piece at the end of the GP stuff. So let's get stuck straight into it. So we'll start from a system perspective. What's new from a system perspective? The first one I want to talk about is the ability to enter your password only once, or your system password once. So for any system administrators out there who know that when I log into any of the system areas, I need to, should put it in the right password. So I need to put in a system password whenever I access one of the system areas. So here I've accessed the user access setup screen, but you'll notice that once I've put in the password once now, if I go into my user security area again, I'm now no longer prompted for the system password. So once I've entered it once for the session, it then holds for the rest of that session. Now what I mean by a session is that I've logged onto GP. If I log out of GP and then log back into GP, then of course I will be prompted for that system password one more time in that session, and then I'm good to go for the rest of that session. So that's a slight improvement there for the system administrators. The next area is the area of document attachments. Everyone should be familiar, everyone who's from 2013 onwards should be familiar with document attachments that were changed and added in from GP 2013 onwards. What they've done in that area, if I just open up the GL transaction entry screen here, they've added now the attachments area to a few extra screens, and the notable ones are, for example, here in the GL transaction entry or the journal entry screen, you'll notice I now have the ability to attach a document attachment to a journal. So this is great for attaching, say, for example, a copy of the the journal working papers or something like that to the actual journal or a source document. I can now attach that to the GL transaction entry screen. So the attach functionality per se is not new because that was added in 2013, but never expanded on that use now throughout the system. And the GL transaction entry screen is one of those areas. The other areas are the receivables transaction entry screen. You'll see that also here now we have the ability to attach an attachment, and also the other big area which was demanded for big time was here against the fixed assets. So now against the fixed assets, we can also attach attachments at the fixed assets screen. The other one that they've made improvements in the attachment area is the debtor inquiry screens. So previously you could only get to the attachments from a card, in other words, a maintenance screen, so you had to be a maintenance user, but I can now get to the attachments from the debtor inquiry screens as well. So that's the debtor inquiry screen as well as the creditor inquiry screen here. So from those two inquiry screens, you can see that I can now get straight to those document attachments. Okay, so that's the expanded use of document attachments that we've seen now in 2018. Like I said, again, I'll keep repeating myself, but the document attachment functionality was introduced in GP 2013, and it continually gets expanded and rolled out further throughout the system. The next area we'll move on to is workflows. Now, workflows, as Michael touched on for his presentation or introduction, is that the workflows is one area that's continually grown throughout, and you would have seen there on the roadmap there that they've continually added to the functionality in workflow. So let's have a look at what they've done in 2018. So if I just go into my workflow maintenance area, the first couple of things we'll talk about is the new workflows they've introduced. So in particular, if I switch to financial here, what they've done is they've added a new workflow here for general ledger account approval. In other words, I can create a workflow for anyone who's now adding a new GL account. So that new GL account, when it's been added, needs to be approved via workflow before that GL account becomes active. So that's one whole new workflow. The other new workflows, which are quite major, if I can use that term, is in the purchasing area. So we've always had workflows in the purchasing area, and particularly around purchase order approvals and requisition approvals, but they've now added these two new ones here around purchase invoice approval and receivings transaction approval. So these two workflows are particularly useful around when a purchase order is either being receipted or is being invoiced. So those two transactions now we can workflow. And this is particularly helpful when we have that scenario whereby a purchase order may have been raised for $100, and now when it's been received or when it's been invoiced, it may not be for $100. That item may be now for $120, and suddenly we have a difference in the invoice value or the receipted value. We can workflow that difference through for approval, so that we're approving that difference before that transaction can be posted. So there's a couple of new workflows they've introduced in GP 2018. And like I said, the most substantial ones are those purchasing ones. If I open up one of the workflows, I'll just quickly touch on one of the workflows here and what some of the work they've done in here. If I look at some of the steps within the workflow, what they've introduced now at a workflow step level, we've always had the ability to escalate based on a time limit, but rather than just go straight to escalation, now they've added this reminder feature. As you can see here on this particular step, it will escalate if nothing happens within 8 hours, but within 4 hours, if nothing happens within 4 hours, then we can actually send out a reminder email. And what does that reminder email look like? If I just switch to my Outlook here, I've just got one sitting in my inbox, and it basically looks like the typical workflow style email that you would receive anyway, with the difference being that the reminder email is just headed here with the words reminder, so you know that it's a reminder email to say, hey, you still haven't taken any action on this particular step within the workflow. Here's a reminder for that. So that's the reminder feature which was added in GP 2018. The other feature that was added in workflows in GP 2018 is the ability when you are down at a step level, so when you're maintaining your workflows or building your workflows, you can use this copy feature now to copy one step to another. So why was that introduced? It was introduced purely so that if I had quite a convoluted criteria that I added or condition that I had around a particular step, rather than to have to enter that for the next step all over again, I can just use that copy feature to copy this step and then obviously alter that step accordingly. So that's the copy feature at a step level within the workflow. So there's a bit of a roundup of what's new at in the workflow maintenance or the workflow area in Dynamics GP for particularly around GP 2018. We'll switch back now to GP here, and we'll have a look at a couple of other things they've introduced. For people who've been used to using things such as the payables transaction inquiry or the receivables transaction inquiry screen, I'll show you both anyway, but you can see now in the past on these screens here, if you wanted to sort by anything other than the document number or document date, yeah, you could do that by switching here by document date and hitting the redisplay, and it would sort by that. But now you're not restricted by that anymore. Now when you come into these inquiry screens, you'll notice that in 2018, you have the ability to sort by other things such as the document type, the original amount, the unapplied amount, the document date. So I can choose any one of those now, and when I do that, you'll see that it sorts my documents, in my case here, by document date, and whether that's in ascending or descending order. And like I said, it's not just the payables. I've got the payables as an example there, but the same is available on the other side of the ledger and the receivables inquiry screen. Now, whether I'm using the receivables, in this case here, the receivables transaction inquiry, or whether I'm using the document inquiry screen, but still the same ability, the same sort features are available on both those screens in both sides of the ledger. So now we're not restricted by the inquiry types that we had previously. Okay, so that's some of the inquiry and sorting options. The next area we want to talk about quickly and touch on is in smart lists. So what's changed in smart lists is, if I just open up this smart list that I have here in my shortcuts. So this is a particular smart list. Now, anyone who uses smart lists will know that when I design my smart list, or say design my own smart list, I would typically save that smart list as a favorite. When I do that, I would hit the favorites button here. Now, what you'll notice in 2018 that's different is when I do hit that save favorite, I do now have the ability to assign a password to that favorite. Now, the reason for this is I may want to restrict this, the ability to alter or change this smart list to a certain number of users or just to myself. So to do that, what I do is I enter a password in here, save that smart list now, or my favorite, I should say, within that smart list using that password, and that basically means that no one is able to then mess with my own smart list, because how many times have I designed a smart list in the past as a favorite, and then someone goes in there and they have the ability to either change the criteria or change the columns or the sort order or all those sorts of things. Whereas now I can lock that down with a password, so that unless you have that password, you can't make any changes to that favorite. Of course, everyone can use my favorite to copy that and create their own favorite, but if I've got it locked down, then you can't change it unless you've got that password. Okay, so that's what they've changed in Smart List. The other thing now we'll move on to is the ability to print a customer statement now directly from the inquiry screen. So going back into, say, for example, my data inquiry screen that I had open earlier to show you the attachment feature, you'll notice that when I have this screen open, now when I hit, there's a print button at the top here, and when I hit that print button, I can directly print a statement. And what this will do, will print using my default setups. It's going to print the very last statement that was generated for this particular customer. Yeah, so it's similar to the reprint feature without going through the reprint feature. You can see here it's reprinted my statement using my, in this case here, using my Word template. But basically it's doing that, but it's using the reprint feature directly, which previously if I wanted to do that, I would have to go through customer statement, reprint, select the customer and so forth. So they've added that now as a direct call from that inquiry screen. Okay. Now, let's moving on to some of the more specific areas. And when I say more specific areas, I'm going to talk about the sales transaction entry screen. So no, not all users may potentially use this screen, but what they've done on this screen now, a couple of small subtle changes, and I'll bring those up and talk through those. So we'll see here that this particular invoice here that I've called up, you might note a subtle change or something different on this screen, and that is that this little stop sign that is displaying here on the sales transaction entry window, that stop sign is basically just a visual cue to tell me that there's a process hold on this document. Now, in the past, you say, well, nothing really new there is functionality-wise. What is new is the visual cue that they've put on the screen there. In the past, if I wanted to know if there was any document holds or process holds on the sales transaction entry screen, I would have to click on the go to the holds area and view any holds. Yeah. Whereas now, not only do I get the visual cue here, but I can actually click on that little stop sign, and it takes me directly to the process holds entry on the sales entry screen. So I don't have to do that. And this all came about because obviously what happened is when Microsoft moved to this lovely ribbon bar, it's all well and good, but they obviously condensed the process holds button, which previously used to sit at the bottom of the screen, and it used to have a visual cue on the button, but that all disappeared when they moved it to the ribbon bar at the top here. So now to bring that back, they've added that visual cue there. So that's the that's the whole status visibility on the transaction entry screen. All right. The next area I'll take you to, I'm going to switch now to the purchasing, so my homepage in the purchasing area, because it's made a bit of a sweeping change here. For years and years and years, we've probably been asking for it here in Australia, because all these wonderful screens that you see here are now being relabeled, and they're all now called payment screens rather than what we've previously called a check screen. So you can see here the build payment batch is now called, sorry, the build batch, the check batch screen is now called the build payment batch screen. And all the subsequent screens have been relabeled and called payment screens, or payment around payments rather than checks. And that's all thanks to Microsoft realizing that, hey, we don't, especially here in Australia, we haven't processed checks probably for over 10 years. So that's the renaming. So no, the windows haven't disappeared, they've just been relabeled. Okay, so that's one of the things. Now on this screen here, whilst I have the build payment batch screen open, I will point out something else that's quite handy that they've added in GP 2018. And you will note here in the middle of the screen is that I have a payment option ID. So when I'm building my batch, I can actually call in this payment option, which works similar to anyone who's used the statement option screen for customer statements, a similar sort of thing. So when I call in one of the payment batch or options here, if I call that in, that payment option there comes with basically, as you can see here, a pre-configured list of criteria or restrictions that I have saved. And you can create as many of these as you like. Now, obviously, I've got one called, hey, payment priority one, or priority one, I should say. But obviously, you could use these to say, for example, hey, this is my 14 days payment option. Here's my 30-day payment option. And by selecting those options, what I'm doing is I'm just defaulting a whole bunch of restrictions in here. So therefore, I can then apply those and add those to my payment batch, and away I go. So rather than having to, pass those restrictions through, which is probably what you currently have to do every time you're using this screen, you've got to go and remember all those restrictions that you're using to build your batch. Now you can just basically save all those restrictions to a payment option, and once you save that to a payment option, you can recall that every time, whether that be for your 30 days and your 14 days, or your weekly run, or your monthly run, whatever you want to call it. So that is the payment option scenario. The only other area I'll show you now in GP before going to the web client is I'll go back to my home page, and one of the things they've done here for anyone using the payment requisitions functionality within GP, if I just expand here, what they've gone and done here is they've expanded on some of the information now that's displayed in this requisition area, and as well as on the actual requisitions themselves. Basically, they've made the link between the requisitions and the purchase orders more evident. So you can see here where I've got requisition number 1, which has already been converted to a purchase order because it's a status of purchased. Yeah. Well, you can see here to the right, they now also give me the purchase order number, so that I know, as a user who raises a requisition, I know what purchase order number that particular requisition has gone through to. Whereas previously I would have to have drilled down and drilled down, drilled down. It's now right here on my homepage. Okay, so now a couple of things within the web client I want to show. So I'm going to switch over to the web client. So here I'm using Google Chrome to log into my web client. Just going to log on as Charlie here. Charlie is a slightly different user to the system administrator user that I was using on the desktop client, and so therefore I get a slightly different homepage when I log on. But what I want to show you, what they've added here, is slightly different look and feel, or added a bit of functionality to the web client once it logs on. And the first thing that they've done, you will notice that across the top here, now I have a direct link to my smart list area from the web client. I don't have to go through the full menu anymore. I can just come straight up here, click on smart list, and it will open up my smart list screen, or pane directly from the top here. whereas previously I would have had to have gone down here and go to Smart List. So that's a nice little shortcut. The other thing I want to quickly show you is what they've done with the autocomplete functionality. So I'll use that same sales order entry screen or the sales transaction entry screen that people may already be using to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. So here, when I get to this screen here, when I'm entering a sales order, I get to, say, for example, the debtor ID. If I start typing here, you'll notice as soon as I start typing, one thing we didn't have in the web client was this autocomplete functionality, yeah? That auto shows me suggestions as I start typing. So they've now added that. Now here it is obviously for a customer, so I'll just select my customer and I'll just keep going, working through here. So when I get down to the line items, I'll get down to the line items. So that was the autocomplete suggesting that a customer, but also obviously the same sort of thing. When I start typing ahead here, you can see it gives me the autocomplete or auto suggestions for even my line items. And I can select any of those and away we go. So that, what they've done there by doing that is basically they've brought the web client in line with the desktop client as far as functionality goes, so that all that same functionality is now carried over to the web client to make the web client pretty much the an exact replica of the desktop client. Okay, so switching back to the desktop client, because now I want to show you some of the Power BI stuff and talk about some of the Power BI functionality. You can see here that back in 2016, if I just expand this, they added the Power BI functionality right from your desktop, so the ability to display those Power BI reports, and they've released a whole bunch of Power BI reports now in what they call a content pack. But before we do that, I'll just quickly, I want to walk you through a couple of slides and talk about some of the other bits and pieces, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that Power BI functionality in a sec. So I'm just going to switch back to my slide deck here and just walk you through a couple of things. So we've gone through all of what's new. Before we do, so one thing we'll talk about quickly is the upgrade paths. So for any users out there, as Michael touched on with in that Lifecycle slide, any users coming from previous versions, we just want to highlight that, hey, regardless of what previous version you're coming from, there is an upgrade path available there. It's not, you don't need to do a re-implementation. So if you're coming from GP 2010 or even earlier from GP 10 or even earlier than that, there is an upgrade path, albeit that potentially if you are coming from these earlier versions, we may need to get you through a couple of versions, but to the end user and to the customer or yourselves, all you know is that you're going, say, for example, in the top one here from GP 2010 to 2018. It just means that our technical guys, when they are actually converting the data, they just need to jump through a couple of versions in the background to get it to 2018. But all we want to highlight from this slide is to say, hey, there is an upgrade path there. You're not, just because you are a few versions behind, you don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater and re-implement. You can upgrade. A couple other things to mention with every new version that's released, obviously Microsoft drops support for certain things in the background or infrastructure. And in particular with GP 2018, they have dropped support for any versions of Windows Server 2008 and any versions of SQL Server 2012 or earlier. So you need to be on SQL Server 2012 and earlier, or later I should say, to go to 2018, and the same with Windows Server, the operating system, which is basically a perfect segue for us to talk about, hey, how are you currently deployed? Are you looking at currently deploying? Because obviously when it does come time to upgrade, most people say, hey, now is a good time to review how the GP is deployed in our organization. Do we want to continue down that path? What's available? So that's basically where we want to talk about, hey, what is available? How do you want to deploy going forward? Because it is a good time when you are upgrading to do that. Because when you're upgrading, obviously you want to talk about, do we need to upgrade our server version of SQL Server or the platform that it's on? And in which case, is it a good time to decide, do we want to look at even going as far as leveraging some of the cloud services and so forth. So basically the three basic options we like to sort of summarize it into. I mean, the choices are unlimited with Dynamics GP, but we kind of summarize it into the three options. So you can continue with your on-premise deployment if that's what you currently have, and continue your on-premise deployment. You can go to a self-managed Azure cloud deployment, or change that to a fully managed GP deployment. So what is the difference between the two? So the GP on-premise deployment you may have at the moment basically means that you either have, whether they be virtualized or otherwise, deployments of, your different servers, and you keep that as is. Or you could go to Azure in the cloud, and you leverage the GP or Azure in the cloud servers, so you can have your SQL server in the cloud, your GP servers, application servers, web servers, all in the cloud, and whether you go right through to your backups and so forth, because all of that is all done in the cloud. And the third option you have is obviously the same as the second option there, but with the difference being is that someone like PA would manage that cloud deployment, and thereby by them managing that cloud deployment, it means that they're obviously looking after your disaster recovery and operating systems and backups and monitoring and so forth. So they're basically your three options for GP in the cloud if you want to leverage the cloud or the deployment of GP. And of course, we can talk more about that going forward. What are the main benefits? Obviously, the main benefits, I'm not going to read through all those there. I think some of the people who are aware of cloud offerings, the biggest one is obviously the redundancy that you have in the cloud means that your disaster recovery is seamless and much more robust, and a lot with the cloud deployment of GP, it's going to be a lot more seamless with, if you're already using things such as Office 365 in the cloud already, then obviously that becomes a lot more seamless, and particularly around Power BI, which is what I'm going to get to in a minute. So without further ado, we'll quickly touch on Power BI because I'm conscious of time. So with Power BI, as I mentioned earlier, the Power BI piece has been there since 2016, and in releasing that Power BI piece, obviously I quickly touched on the fact that you can pull up those Power BI pieces or reports and show those on your Dynamics GP homepage. The other thing that I didn't touch on, and I won't go into too much detail, but is that the data that gets pushed out to Power BI as a reporting tool is controlled or can be controlled by this OData functionality, which they've introduced from 2016, and they've revised that in 2018, and how that's controlled. So ultimately, what we're getting at there is that the people who, your system administrators from within GP, can control the data that's being pushed out and published out to that Power BI report users. So you have the control. It's not as if you're losing that control over what data gets pushed out. So I'm quickly just going to switch back to GP and just show you a little bit of the Power BI piece, because we are short on time, but I will quickly touch on this. So yeah, you'll notice that I was able to show my Power BI report here on my homepage, and when I want to interact with that report, I can just click on that report, and you'll see that what that is doing, it's just going to log me into my Power BI report area within, you're just using a simple browser here. When I do, you'll see that it, if I just scroll down the page here, I'm pulling out reports on what I call my own design dashboard, but I've pulled these dashboards together from my, actually I'll go to, I'll just go straight to the reports because we're a bit short on time. So I'll go straight to the reports area here. Oh, here we go. Did I not go to my GP area? Reports. Oh, I've lost my reports. Okay, well, I was going to show you the content pack. There is a whole bunch of reports that ship with, so there is a whole bunch of reports here that ship out of the box, and they're basically what we call the content pack. So you see down the bottom of the page here, I have financial, sales tab, a purchasing tab. You'll notice that the one from the sales tab, that one there is the one that I currently have obviously flowing through onto my home page in GP, the purchasing tab. So the ones that I'm just showing you here are the ones that are now shipping in the GP 2018 content pack. So this content pack that I'm showing you here is only available with GP 2018. So you will need to upgrade to GP 2018 if you want to deploy this default content pack, but you can use Power BI on earlier versions. In fact, we have a whole bunch of other reports that our BI team has put together who are currently working and operating on earlier versions of Dynamics GP. Now, like I said, I am a bit conscious of time. I'd love to show you a lot more functionality of Power BI and some of the things, funky things you can do there, because it's got some great drill down and drill through functionality. But in conscious of time and wanting to wrap up, I will switch back and we will move on to our Q&A area, and that sort of wraps up what I have to show.
Brilliant, thank you, Rob. Look, I really appreciate you took us through a bit of a whirlwind tour there of a number of things, the new features in 2018, plus platform considerations, plus Power BI, all in the one webinar. One thing I did want to just reinforce, Rob mentioned the ability to take your existing Dynamics GP solution and put it into the cloud and run on a cloud platform. And he noted there this concept of bring your own licenses. I just want to reinforce the fact that you already have a license for Dynamics GP that enables you to run that application in the cloud and run it on Azure. You do not need to license your solution any differently to what you already have. So you can decide to maintain on-premise or take into Azure right now with the licensing that you already have. You do not need to purchase another subscription for GP. So on that note, what I'd like to do is just open the floor for questions. I can see, Rob, we've got a couple of questions that have already come through, so we might just quickly take those ones and allow people another moment there to type in any questions they may have. We'll try and get to those ones as well. So the first one is GP 2013. Okay, I'm currently running GP 2013. When do I have to upgrade by? Rob, I can actually take that one if you like.
Yep.
We noted earlier the concept of the Microsoft support lifecycle and the 5 + 5 years. So GP 2013 is now out of mainstream support. Officially, as of today, it's out of mainstream support. Now, you do not have to upgrade, but we would absolutely not recommend anyone running your financial application on an unsupported platform by the vendor. So my suggestion there would be talk to us as quickly as possible to plan for an upgrade as quickly as possible. And that would go for any version, 2013 and below. Next question around Power BI. Rob, what Power BI license is included with my current GP licensing? Good question.
Yeah, I can answer that. Well, yeah, we get this asked a lot actually. Yeah, there's no actual Power BI licenses included with Dynamics GP, because some people seem to think that there is. But what they do, what Microsoft do offer is that content pack. So you do get the whole pre-configured reports in that content pack that I just quickly showed you there. So out of the box, if you do own Power BI, if you subscribe to Power BI, you do get the content pack. And how do you get the Power BI licenses? Well, they're just part of your Office 365 subscription. So as long as you subscribe to Power BI through your Office 365 subscription, you can then download that content pack, connect that to your Dynamics GP data, and away you go. You have some reports straight out of the box.
Excellent, thank you. Now maybe a potential follow-on question here. Can you publish Power BI reports to users without a GP license?
Absolutely, yeah. So Power BI is its own BI reporting tool in its own right. So you can push out, and in fact, it's actually a lot more flexible in the deployment of reports than GP is, because you could push out. Power BI even has the ability to render onto a mobile device, so I can push it out to a tablet or to a mobile phone. So yep, you can be pulling data from GP and pushing that out to any user, even and that user is not even a GP user. In fact, one of the examples we use, if I had time, is that our BI team designed a Power BI report to push out to a tablet device for the guys to use as an inquiry in the warehouse. So they would walk around with a tablet, and if they had an inquiry on a particular part or an item in the warehouse, they would just type in the search or scan an item, and that would actually use a Power BI report to render the inquiry.
Cool, thank you, Rob. Another quick one, and maybe just a yes or no, conscious of time. Does the web client support VBA coding yet?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer the yet bit, it won't, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Can you connect Power BI to a source other than GP and report across 2 or more systems?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Power BI, yep.
Have there been any advances in managing integrations with GP 2018 compared to 2013?
Yeah, look, as far as the product itself, no. Other than if you're getting into the development, software development kit, and we can talk about that, but I don't want to go into too much detail there. But typically, we manage most at PA. We manage most integrations via a tool, third-party tool such as a Scribe or a Smart Connect. So I'd love to take that question offline if we can, and if whoever asked that, we can have a whole chat about that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And from an upgrade perspective, I do appreciate that we would already be having conversations with a lot of clients around upgrading now already anyway by your account manager, and we'll continue to have those conversations with you as part of the natural course of discussing your Dynamics GP solution and the options available to you in terms of updating and upgrading. So on that note, just while we're finishing up here, I'd like to say a quick thank you to Rob, who presented a lot of content to us in a short period of time. Do appreciate the interaction there with the questions that came through as well, which is excellent. There were a couple of very specific questions there that we didn't get time to get to, so we will follow up with those individuals and get a response, and particularly come back to you with regard to the options around integration. So thank you everyone for attending. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye everyone.